All right, thank you for the warm welcome. To get a woo before it's even 10 o'clock is really a big feat. So how are you all doing this morning? I hate when the speaker's like, how are you doing this morning? And then they say, that's pathetic, do it again. But that was, so can we do it again? How are you doing this morning? I know it's Monday, it's really early, and it's a hard slot for me to have, but here we are. I appreciate you all being here. I understand that many of you are here with your classes, so you didn't have a choice. Is that correct? Okay, good to know. How many are here that because you did have a choice and you chose to come learn more about personal branding? It's really good to see some familiar faces. I used to work here at Spalding. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. You'll find out really quickly, if you didn't guess from the opening music there, that I am a Swiftie. I am not apologizing for that. If there are other Swifties in the house, welcome. I did make it to the Heirs Tour this year. That was like winning the Hunger Games, but happy that I was able to go. So a little bit about me. I got a bachelor's degree in communication at Lindsey Wilson College. Have you all heard of Lindsey Wilson College? It's a small private liberal arts institution in Columbia, Kentucky. I played on the softball team there. And then the reason why I'm here is I'm an alum. I got my MSBC here at Spalding. And so again, like I said, I worked here. So my experience is about 10 years as far as marketing, communications, and social media. I actually started in the admissions office. So do we have some admissions folks here today? Raise your hands. All right, I was in the admissions office here at Spalding for 7 years, which is a long time for admissions. A lot of times, 1 or 2 years is typical. Not saying you should leave, definitely stay, just because there's a lot of travel involved, but I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed going out into the community and meeting with prospective students who were interested in coming here at Spalding. And so I did that for a little while, and then here at Spalding moved into Director of Social Media and Digital Recruiting role. Jackson is now here doing social media for Spalding, so good to see you. Also was the Senior Director of Marketing here at Spalding before moving on to the University of Louisville. So at U of L, I still teach in the online MBA program. I serve as a part-time lecturer for their Strategic Managerial Communications course. I also work at Bellarmine as the Director of Communication for Content Strategy. And I also have my own business as a consultant. And so, again, I'm here today to talk to you all about personal branding, social media, and career. Anything you want to ask me, I will be as honest with you as possible, because honesty is a big part of my personal brand. And again, I am a musician as well. So that's something else if you have anyone that wants to talk about that. I've been able to open for Joan Osborne, Brandy Carlisle, Sarah McLachlan, Miranda Lambert. But at the end of the day, I'm still a communications person. I think the hardest day that I ever had of my life as far as a professional was the night that we got to open up for Sarah McLachlan and Miranda Lambert. And then the very next morning I had to answer the phone and say, Spalding University, how can I help you? That was a really tough day, because the night before I'm living my dream, the next day I'm an admissions counselor. Not that that's not a dream, but a very different type of dream nonetheless. So a big thing about my presentation style is that although I'm the one standing up here, research shows that the human attention span is less than a goldfish, and goldfish have an attention span of 8 seconds. So I lost you all a long time ago. So I'm only going to be up here talking to you, not at you, and I want you all to talk back to me. I am the type of person, when I ask a question and no one answers, I stand here and it's awkward silence. So someone please answer if I ask a question. It just makes everyone stay awake, and it keeps me from having to talk at you. So this is a little bit of an overview: personal branding, brand consistency, social media, how to build your network, and again, just making sure that I'm answering any questions that you have. So everybody goes to college with the purpose of getting a job or doing something after college. That's the point, is to learn things, to educate yourself, to gain skills, to gain knowledge, and then to go out into the world, change the world, do all the things. And so again, you don't have to limit the questions today to just what I'm planning to talk about. I want to answer any questions that you have that you think could help you as you all embark on the next piece of your career. So when you see this question, what is your personal brand? What do you think of? And what do you think personal brand means? This is the part where we all just sit here in silence. How people see you, that is correct. What else? That's great. What you do. Yep. Another good answer. Public image, yep. And we're going to talk about reputation and personal brand in a second, because they are similar, but yes, public image. Did you have something? Okay. Anybody else? What you stand for, absolutely. Values, yep. Yep, your aesthetic. All of that. This is good. Anyone have anything else? Okay. This is why it matters. And you all guessed it perfectly, and you answered it perfectly. So how people see you and how they would describe you, similar to how you think about companies as well. Characteristics that kind of guide you. We talked about values, and so that's something to think about. And then according to Forbes, basically it's important for the advancement in your career as far as your personal brand. And so something else I always like to ask is not just personal brand, but what are some brands that you all think do a good job with their marketing, with their branding, representing who they are? Apple. Agree. Why do you think so? Yep. No, that's good. Who else? That's the one that everyone always says, and I don't stop until we get there. Why Nike? Nike does a really good job of bringing you in and hooking you emotionally before you even know it's a Nike commercial. And that's the example of a really good brand. Who else? Anyone have any other suggestions or ideas of brands that do a good job representing themselves? Anyone? Nike's always the big one, and that's the one that I like to point out. But I also wanted to share a little bit about my story. And so, Deb, if you have follow-up questions to this, let me know, because this is a new slide for me, and you told me to touch on it, so I'm going to try. But again, if people have follow-up questions or want to talk about their own, experiences, please do. So I grew up very aware of reputation. My parents are very, very conservative, and they care a lot about what people think. They're older, they're in their 80s, so I think they just grew up in a different generation. And so I was always taught, at a very young age, if you do this, if you do that, people will think this of you, people will think that of you. And so I was always aware from a very young age that my reputation was important. And so as a communications major at Lindsey Wilson, I learned a lot about public relations, which is a big part of what I do, brand management, brand reputation. So again, thinking about the idea of reputation. And I mentioned that reputation and personal branding are similar, but they're also different, and this is how. So reputation tends to be more about credibility and is made up of the opinions of other people. And then your personal brand is more about visibility. We talked about values earlier, and again, values and kind of what you outwardly represent. And it's done intentionally and kind of how you want people to see you. And so kind of my personal brand in action, it actually spawned here at Spalding. So again, I think for a long time I lived a certain way, and I think I still do. And I never really realized the way that other people perceived that, because you don't just ask somebody, what do you think about my personal brand? I guess you could. I never had. So like I said, I was the director of marketing for a while here at Spalding, and got an email from a faculty member actually in the school business. And no offense to the faculty in the room, but typically when a faculty member is emailing the director of marketing, they might want something or need something from you. So this person asked me to meet, and I assumed it was because they wanted something from me, which is fine. That's my job. So we had a meeting, and instead they told me that they were starting this book club. And the idea behind it was the book they were reading said, if you were to start a new business, what 3 people would you bring with you from your current company to start your new business? Now, this is a person I didn't really have a relationship with before. I knew them, but I didn't know them well. And so I was intrigued why they said this to me, and I was like, well, why would you choose me? And they talked about all of these qualities that they saw in me, that I was very responsible, that I was honest, that I had a really strong conviction in everything that I did, that I didn't take no for an answer, that I worked really hard, all these things about me that I had no idea I was putting out into the world. So when you're not sure what people think of you or what your personal brand is, start thinking of it from those terms, what you're putting out. Because again, I didn't think about it. But when, of course, they asked me, I, of course, said yes, and I'm still in that book club, and that was pre-COVID, and so it was really important to help get me through COVID. But again, I just wanted to share what that looks like if you're not sure what a personal brand is or how you can get there. The other thing, as far as advice, Doug asked me to share some advice that I have as far as things you can be doing now. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I have for undergrads is to get involved. Get involved, get to know people, start networking now. The reality is you want to network before you need your network, because by the time you need your network, it's too late. And what I mean by that, this past year, I guess it was February, I was at U of L until October, and I was recruited away from U of L to a healthcare company that paid me like double what I was making at U of L. So of course I was going to take it because, I mean, that's a lot of money. And they recruited me, and 4 months later, they let go of 50 people that they had brought in, including me. And so I lost my job 4 months into my new job. And so luckily, I had built this really big network of people that I was able to, the first day I lost my job, I sent out my updated resume, I sent like my bio, all this information. I keep like a list of everybody that I would want to connect with before I posted anything on social media. And I immediately set up meetings with all of these people, trying to learn who was hiring and just get information. You know, this time when I was looking for a job, I was very specific in what I wanted. I wanted a company that valued work-life balance. That was very important to me. That really cared about diversity, inclusion. Those were things that mattered to me and wasn't just a mission. And so I made a list of my absolutes. And if it didn't meet the absolute, then I didn't want it. And so I set up all these informational meetings with all of these people from all these different companies to learn more. And it was really interesting, and I was kind of able to use that list to get rid of some places really quickly. But the point is, I built the network before I needed the network. So I had the people before I lost my job. And so every job I've ever gotten has been from knowing somebody. When I got hired at Spalding, I knew the director of student engagement, and she connected me with the director of admissions, and that's how I got hired at Spalding. The reason I got on at Bellarmine, the week I lost my job, I met with the vice president of communications, and he said, we're going to have a position open. He kind of laid out the steps for me, and I stayed in touch with him. I still started my consulting business as I was kind of thinking that could happen, and then it eventually did. But again, it's because I had the network in advance. My first job out of college was at the college because I was really close to the dean of students, and he helped me get the job at the college. So while all of my friends were graduating seniors and stressing because they didn't have a job, luckily I had one my whole senior year, and it's because of the connections that I made. So my biggest piece of advice for you now is connect with people, network, get involved. And the networking doesn't have to be face-to-face. It can be online. I know a lot of people aren't comfortable in face-to-face situations, so if you're not, then you can create a LinkedIn account. So there's ways that you can connect without having to be in person. So that's my biggest piece of advice, and it's kind of the things that I've learned along the way. So going back to personal brand and thinking about it, do you all know who this is at the bottom of the screen? Steve Jobs. All right, somebody said aesthetics earlier when we were talking about, you know, your personal brand. The way that Steve Jobs approached every single Apple announcement and event, he clearly had a certain aesthetic. The message that he wanted to communicate was that he was a common man and he didn't think he was better than everybody else. He didn't show up with a suit and tie. He showed up in a black shirt, jeans, and sneakers every single event. Obviously, he could have afforded something a lot more expensive than that, but this is the kind of brand that he wanted to portray, somebody that everybody could relate to. So if you're trying to figure out your brand, these are some ideas. Write down things that describe your personality, things you're passionate about. Earlier you said values, that too. You know, when I think about myself and things I'm passionate about, all of the things that the person in the book club said about me is what I want people to think. I just didn't know they did. And so again, an exercise in making sure you're doing that is writing those things down. Something else I would recommend too is to write out your bio. And in addition to including your education and work experience, write down other things that you're interested in. When you start working in the workforce, the reality is oftentimes you spend more time with your coworkers than your family. And so it's really important when you're looking for a job for the place to get to know you beyond just your achievements, because they're going to want to. Every interview that I've been in, I've been asked something personal about myself. And so it's really important that you make sure you communicate those things as well. Have a specialty. Every single interview I've been in, it's the question at the end, why should we hire you over everybody else? And when you answer that question, you want to answer it with conviction and confidence, but what you don't want to do is be cocky. So obviously, again, be thinking about what it is that you're good at, what it is that separates you from everybody else, and how you can answer that question. The other thing is develop your communication skills. How many of you all have heard of an elevator pitch? The number of people that have heard of that get smaller and smaller as the students get younger and younger. So I will explain it to you. Basically, an elevator pitch is the idea of what can you convey about yourself in the time that it took from you to get on the bottom of an elevator to get to the top floor. And the reason why is, let me find it. Before we had phones, when you got on an elevator, you had to actually talk to the person, or it was super awkward like it was when we were all sitting here in silence. Now, when you get on an elevator, you get on your phone, even if you don't have service, and you pretend that you do so that you don't have to make eye contact and that you don't have to talk to the person. Am I correct? I mean, I do that too. So the idea is an elevator pitch. What can you convey about yourself in a very short amount of time? As I said earlier, the attention span of an adult is less than a goldfish, so you have about 8 seconds. So let's think about what you can convey in 8 to 10 seconds about yourself, because first impressions matter. Something that Deb mentioned, and I wanted to also kind of throw in, it wasn't part of the presentation, but when you go for a job interview, every person that you interact with from the moment that you arrive until the end is important. I don't care if it's the custodian, the secretary, or anyone. And I'll tell a story about a situation that happened here at Spalding with a previous secretary that was here 30 years, no longer at Spalding, but was here for 30 years. So we had a person come in for an interview, and he had done really well in the video interview. We were super excited to meet him. But then whenever he met with the secretary before she brought him back to meet with us, he was extremely rude to her and kind of blew her off. And so she seated him and then came to our area and told us that we had this interview and that he had arrived. But she told us how he treated her. And so we spent about 10 minutes with him and then sent him on his way, because we knew if he could treat her that way, he could treat anybody that way. And so again, you can't just be trying to perform to the person in the room who you think matters, because the reality is everybody in an organization matters and has an opinion. This next thing that I'll share with you is another example of a friend of mine who works at a hotel here. It isn't just who you interact with in the building that matters either. Maybe it's what your car looks like at the place that you go to, or the inside of your vehicle, not the outside. And this is why I say that. I have a friend who works at a hotel in downtown Louisville. When they interview people for hospitality positions or event positions, after the person is in, they have a security system. After the person comes in and they're in the interview, they send somebody out to look inside their car to see if their car is a train wreck or if it's organized. Because to them, if your life is a train wreck in your car, it could potentially, I mean, again, I'm not saying that I believe in any of these things. I'm only sharing with you experiences and things of people I know, because I didn't know that. And again, these are all little things that you might not think matter that somebody else might think matters. So I wanted to share a few little things with you, just because it's interesting. And then one last thing, because it's Spalding and I was thinking of Rick Barney. People in the room might know my former boss, Rick Barney. My former boss was very, very old school. He had one email address, and it was his Spalding email address. So when he left, I had to create an email address for him that wasn't Spalding. He didn't know how to do that. And he didn't believe in social media, but he was the director of marketing. That's a whole other story. But the one thing that I think is super interesting is that when anybody applied for a job at Spalding, if you didn't send a handwritten thank you card, he discounted you and you were not even considered. So I know, again, for people in this room, that might seem really old school, but you have to think about it. There are 4 generations in the workforce right now. So when you interview with somebody, if they're considered what I would consider Rick to be old school, for them, a handwritten thank you note is a must. For me, an email is fine. But for him, he wanted a handwritten thank you note. So those are just some tidbits that weren't in the presentation that I wanted to share, because you mentioned talking about some career stuff, so I did want to mention that. Also, back to, again, branding, thinking about the importance of consistency. Any type of marketing, branding, anything, the most important thing is to be consistent. And so I am not a drinker of Starbucks, but I do find this very interesting. And so if you look at the history of their red cup from 2009 to 2015, you can kind of see that it looked pretty similar, but eventually when you get to 2014, the colors start to fade a little bit. In 2014, there was some dark maroons and then red. 2015, it went solid red. People lost their minds and said that Starbucks completely got rid of the meaning of Christmas, and there was a war on Christmas. It was trending on social media. The hashtag Merry Christmas Starbucks was trending. People at the stores would go in and say their name was Merry Christmas because they wanted them to have to say it out loud. It was this whole debacle simply because they barely changed the color of their cup. In 2016, they got smart and had the customers design the cup. That way, if people were upset, they could just say, well, the customers designed the cup. But again, this is just an example of a lack of brand consistency. One little change and people got really upset about it. I know there's been a lot of brands out there that have tried to rebrand. I know Burger King has tried that recently with more of a retro look. Kroger has done that as well. I know recently, or in the past couple of years, UK did that with their logo. So a lot of companies try to rebrand. Some fall flat. And when they do, if they're not consistent, this is an example of what can happen. All right, transitioning to social media. So whether you know it or like it or not, everything you post on social media is basically, it's going to impact your personal brand. So you have to think about, how you want to be known, and I'll explain that. So every publicly accessible social media profile you have is a professional social media profile, even if you don't want it to be. So what I mean is, if I have 900 people that I'm friends with on Facebook or on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, even if it's a private account, there are 900 people that I'm connected with. The way that works is, if I'm connected with you and your future employer is a mutual friend of mine, they will reach out to me and ask me to send screenshots. And that has happened multiple times. Has it happened to anybody else? I see you shaking your head in the back. Yep, it happens. I cannot tell you how many times that has happened where someone has said, hey, I noticed that you're a mutual friend with so-and-so. Can you send me like a screenshot of the last month of this? Or can you send me their about section? Can you send me this? And I mean, I'll do it, and people have done it for me. So even if you think it's private, it isn't always private. Why that matters. Is there anyone in this room that doesn't like puppies? Okay. I have never in my life come across anyone who has said they don't like puppies. So it always feels like a safe thing to do. So let's say I have my private account and I post, I hate puppies. All those people that see that are going to think there's something wrong with me if I hate puppies, since none of you do, right? Then the next thing I post is that I kick puppies. I promise that I don't, because I love them, right? If I then say, hey guys, I lost my job, can anyone help me? Well, they're going to think I'm nuts because I hate and kick puppies, correct? And they're probably not going to want to help me, right? The whole point of social media, in addition to connecting with people and building relationships and all of that, again, is to have the network for when you need it. And if you're posting things that are negative, I use puppies because it's safe, or if you're posting things that other people consider to be controversial, and they see your post and they have this feeling of or yuck. I don't know if any of you all have that in your feeds. I do. Some people I see post certain things and it makes me go ugh. Typically I hit snooze or mute or whatever, but if you have those people in your feed, you're not going to help them. So if you're one of those people in their feed, they're not going to help you. So I say that, and I use the puppy example because I think sometimes we put things out that we might mean to be funny or a joke, and I'll show you some of those examples later, but people can take things different ways. If you don't know what's out there, yes? That's a really good question. So basically the question is, are you judged for who you're associated with? I can't answer that. My gut says yes. I mean, unfortunately, because I know in certain situations that I've been in, when I've been in job reviews, and a lot of what I did here at Spalding was when there was a candidate that was in a higher up position, I would work with HR to review their social media platforms and that sort of thing. I've done that for other companies too. I'm sitting on a hiring committee right now for the Hydrocephalus Association, just trying to help them find someone. And I will say that in some instances when people, like it could have been the group, like if they were in a Facebook group or hashtags that they use that were inappropriate. So, I mean, if you're guilty by association for those, it could be possible. I don't know. It's a great question though. I know you can't control other people, so that makes it hard. My gut says yes, unfortunately. I don't know if anyone else has opinions. I don't want to be the only one. I hope not for your sake, but it's a good question. I mentioned Googling yourself, and the reason why is because a friend of mine that still works here, actually, her brother was interviewing for a job at Humana, and they pulled a Google search to show him what all was coming up about him, and it was things that he didn't even know were out there about him. And so he obviously had a lot of things he needed to clean up, but they did bring that to him and show him. So I think Googling yourself. This next piece is really when you're looking for a job. I don't expect everybody to go home and do this today, but when you're looking for a job, having consistent profile pictures that is a picture of you, consistent cover photos, consistent usernames that are not inappropriate, specifically email addresses that are not inappropriate. When I was in admissions, and I'm sure you all can relate, you see a lot of really interesting email addresses that students choose. So if you need to create a totally new email address just for jobs, do that. I have one that's separate that I created just for applying to jobs. I highly recommend that. And again, just making sure that you're sharing information about yourself that's relevant, whether that's your skills or anything that you're interested in. And how to do that, building your online network. How many of you all have a LinkedIn account already? A few of you? Okay. Create a LinkedIn account once you're in the process of starting to look for jobs, maybe your junior, senior year of college, once you're in that phase. I think it's important to do that. And kind of this is a list of people that you can connect with. Obviously, your classmates, professors, other alums at the institution. If you have a current employer, a former employer, a coach, a family member, friends, mentors, anything like that. And I encourage you to engage, like, comment on other people's posts. And again, just make sure you're posting regularly on all the platforms. And I always tell people quality over quantity is really important for what you're putting out. Again, with social media accounts, thinking about your settings. Social media changes all the time and the account settings change all the time. So if you want a private account, make sure everything's private. On Facebook specifically, certain photo albums may be public, certain aspects of your About Me or your bio may be public. So make sure whatever it is that you are putting out, that you want it to be to the audience that you want it to be, whether it's public or private. I mentioned this already, but it's super important, professional username and handle. We actually had a person who applied for a job here at Spalding. It was a PR position. Their Instagram handle, super inappropriate. They did not get a call back for an interview. So again, just making sure that you're having things that are professional and represent you as well. Again, I mentioned reviewing your bio and your About Me sections because, again, those are the things that I've been asked to screenshot when people have asked me for things. So make sure that you're doing that. The other piece, too, is just making sure, if you have a website, if you have a blog, if you have a LinkedIn, putting your LinkedIn, when you're applying for jobs, not now, linking it from your other networks. I always tell people you never want to post too much because, again, that can be considered annoying. So just try to find a good balance. I always try to keep things positive. I feel like there's enough negativity in the world. I mentioned hashtags. You asked, are you, guilty by association, essentially? And, I've had people who have gotten kicked out of interview processes because of hashtags that they used because they were really inappropriate. And so, again, thinking about those things as well. I mentioned, Facebook groups. I had a girl that got kicked out of an interview process because of a Facebook group that she was in. One of the things that came up on the Google search that I mentioned for my friend was a Facebook group that he was in. So again, thinking about the groups that you're in, the pages that you've liked, things that you're associated with, how that can represent you. And basically, you have to think about it. If you were a recruiter, would you hire you based on the things that you see? And, I don't know if there's any athletes in the room, but when you think about, the draft night for whether it's NFL, Major League Baseball, any type of, NBA, how often do you see a player get drafted and then the next day, all these tweets that they tweeted when they were 16 come out and they're spending their whole first day of being a number one, round pick, cleaning up their image, and their PR person's trying to clean up their image. So, you don't want that to happen to you on any scale, whether that's for a job, if you apply to grad school. I know some grad schools, they look at your social media. So clean that stuff up before you go and try to get into the next phase, because I promise you it will come back, unfortunately. I've seen it happen, and I've seen people get kicked out of school because of things that they've done. So again, just make sure that you're being really, really careful with the things that you post. This is an example. I screenshotted this because it made me laugh. I won't read all the bleeps, but you get the point. Basically, this person is starting a new job, not super excited about it. The person that hired them basically said, no, you're not, you're fired. And then they lost their job over Twitter. So again, not great. These are some headlines. I don't know if any of you all saw these. During COVID, the TikTok guy who was creating paints at Sherwin-Williams, showing people how to create their certain paints, they fired him. If it were me, I would have made him their influencer and had him do tutorials and things because they developed a really big following because of it. And so to me, it was just interesting that they went that route instead. But again, that's what happened to him. I'm sure you all remember the NCAA tournament a few years ago, like the Kent State players who had posted some things on Snapchat. They ended up getting in trouble. They were suspended. They couldn't play in the rest of the tournament. There was an RN in Tennessee during COVID that was posting things about patients. She lost her job because of it. A flight attendant was doing a thing where she was kind of sharing hacks and secrets about, the traveling industry. She lost her job because of it. So I'm sure you all have seen many instances where people posted things on social media, thought it was funny, and then ended up, losing their job because of it. This is my final thoughts, and then I wanted just to kind of have a discussion and kind of elaborate on some things. But, I really respect Nikki Sundstrom a lot. She works at the University of Michigan, and, this is something that she said, and I screenshotted it because I think it's so true. There is no separation of social and state. What you post online has the ability to impact your personal and professional life. This can extend to what you like, share, comment, and who you follow. The internet is forever and frequently unforgiving. Tell your friends. And I think that's really important because a lot of the things that you all brought up about, does it matter who you follow? Does it matter these sorts of things? And so the answer is yes, it does. And, when you work in the industry that I've been in, I've been in social media for 10 years now, or 11 years almost. I have seen so many things happen here with companies that I consult with where things were posted and there were severe consequences. I've seen it happen with faculty and staff. I've seen it happen with students. And so again, although social media is somewhat new, when you think about the policies and the procedures and the consequences, it's been around for a long time. But people are still just trying to catch up with the ideas and the way that it can affect you professionally. So again, those are my final thoughts. I have other things I can talk about. I can talk all day. I wanted to make it beneficial to you all. So if there's questions that you have, I'm happy to also talk about other things like cover letters and resumes, and I have a whole other presentation for that. But I really just wanted to leave it up to you all what you want to talk about. Or Deb, what you want me to talk about.
I think if you could, one of the things I want everybody to start thinking about is what you could do here and right now. Yes, with social media, Rebecca. I think I want to go look at my car. Okay?
Hey, you never know.
So thank you for that. But references, talking about networking and making contacts while you're in college. Do you have any advice on how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think like I said at the beginning, getting involved. The good thing about going to a smaller school like Spalding is that you're going to be able to connect with your professors really well, and you're going to be able to connect with the faculty and the other faculty and staff. And so, when you first get out of college, your first job, you might be using either a coach from here, a faculty member, a staff member. I have people that I worked with that were student workers of mine at Spalding in 2020 and 2021 that I'm still writing recommendation letters for, not just for jobs, but for grad school. So, I feel like you could use anyone in your college experience as a reference. The reason why it's important to do things now, like connect with them, is so that when they're asked to provide a personal reference for you, they have something they can say. That's the hard part for me is that sometimes people ask me, and I only knew them for 3 months, and they're like, can you write a recommendation letter for me? And I'll do it, but it's hard for me to know them on a deep level if I only worked with them for 3 months. And for this one person, it was during COVID. So the only way I really worked with them, I worked with them from March until they graduated in June. And so I'm still writing recommendation letters, but I don't know them that well. So make a point to get to know people, get to know your faculty, get to know the staff on this campus, because they will be the ones when you first graduate that can help you. The other thing to think about too is I encourage you, start writing down, if you have volunteer experiences that you're doing, if you have awards that you've received, if you play a sport, start making notes of all of the little accomplishments or big accomplishments that you have, because when you first write a cover letter, your very first cover letter, those are going to be the things that you highlight is what you're doing now. Because again, you're not going to have any professional experience. And so you have to figure out a way to say, even though your job is asking for 2 to 3 years experience, I gained this experience during my time in college. So for example, I don't know, in Jackson you would know, if they have a social media ambassador program anymore. I know they did when I was here. Do that, put it on your resume. Because again, that's something you can point to. You can say, I have this experience. You're asking for 2 years experience in social media. I actually have 3 years experience as an ambassador, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when I say get involved. That's the type of involvement, SGA, other organizations, so that you can point to the experience, so that when you need a reference, you can actually know the people and they can know you, because you want your references to be able to speak about you personally.
Yeah, and to add to that a little bit is spend some time and thinking, why am I majoring in what I'm majoring in? What are my expectations? And what are people looking for? And you can get lists of soft skills and right, develop those skills with some of my extracurricular activities or work-study jobs. But telling a story is so important, and having somebody else be able to tell that story sets you apart from just, yeah, I know that person.
Yeah, like for example, when you go to an interview, I encourage you to don't just answer the tell me about yourself with, hi, I'm Amanda. I went to Lindsey Wilson College. I also got my master's degree from Spalding University. They can see on your resume all of those things. So when someone says to me, tell me about yourself, my name is Amanda. My first night away from college, or my first night away from home was my first night at college. College was a transformational experience for me because of that, and that's why I'm so passionate about higher education. That's a better story than what I read on my resume, because they can see it. So figure out how to tell your story, because that's what's going to make you memorable in a job interview versus just reading through a list of things that your skills and things that you can do. So tell your story, because we all have one. I'm here to answer any and all questions. It doesn't just have to be about this. I'll answer anything. I don't care. Because that is my brand, to be honest. Yeah.
How do you set up meetings with like all your connections?
I literally just started emailing people that I had email addresses for, and I started on LinkedIn with the people that I didn't. So here's what I did. I was very meticulous with my process. The day I lost my job, I didn't panic. I am a person that's very realistic, and so when the email came through that you have this meeting, I looked at my wife and I said, I'm going to get fired in about 45 minutes, so don't send me jobs today. I have a plan. She sent me jobs. She didn't listen. She still sent me jobs because she didn't trust my plan, but that's okay. I knew it was coming. I'm not an idiot. I can read through the lines. I've seen it, done it, whatever. So that day, I didn't panic. I got on, it's actually called, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Louisville Business First, but Louisville Business First has a thing called the Book of Lists, and it lists all companies, and it actually ranks them. So you could see what companies are in healthcare, what companies are in education, and it'll rank them based on like the people that have given them scores or like the top places to work. So I made a list of all the industries that I was interested in potentially pursuing. That was my first step. Then I made a list of the companies that apparently, based on what I had read, were solid companies. Then I made the list of my absolutes, like the things I absolutely have to have. I wanted hybrid. I didn't want to go back in the office 5 days a week. That was a must. Adequate vacation time. I mentioned, diversity and inclusion initiatives that were actually happening, not just being talked about, work-life balance. I had a list. Then from there, I reached out to the people that I knew that I had email addresses for at the companies. So I reached out to GE, Humana, Brown-Forman. I had connections at all those places. Then from there, if I didn't have a connection at a place, I got on my LinkedIn to see if I had a connection. If I had a connection, I would message them on LinkedIn. If I didn't, I would find somebody else that I knew that did. So I would look at like the second connector. And then I would have them reach out for me to do the mutual connection. So I set up virtual meetings and face-to-face meetings, many of them, just to basically ask them questions. How has your experience been? What has been the biggest challenge? Where do you see the company going in the next 5 years? I just asked them a bunch of questions. I asked about work-life balance. I asked about benefits, time off, scheduling as far as in office and not. And so those were the things that I asked, and that was my process. Luckily, like I said, I had been kind of fostering those relationships for a long time. So that way when I reached out to them, it wasn't out of the blue. And that was the other thing that was really important. And, I will say the biggest lesson I've learned in 2023, and this extends beyond work, this is just life. The biggest lesson that I've learned this year is that you have no idea how important it is to connect and build a supportive community around you, because you will go through things in your life that you're going to need other people to get you through them. And then they're going to need you for you to get them through them. And as a 40-year-old adult standing here today, I will tell you that is the biggest lesson that I have learned in my 40 years. And unfortunately, I learned it this year because there's been a lot of really terrible things happen. But what's been amazing is the people. And so that's why relationships and networking and connections and community is so important. But thank you for asking. What other questions? I'll give you all the life hacks, all the life lessons. I can tell you anything you want to know about anything. Is there anything else, Deb, that you want me to talk about?
about, which I think is real important for us to start thinking about, is that the networking is you don't just reach out to somebody when you need something, right? You want to be their network as well. And so it's this give and take, because you want to make sure that you're giving as much as you're asking. And it's this collaboration that creates that foundation. So when did you start? You said that you're 40, you now understand that this is important. But when did you start to build that?
I think always. I think I've always been that person. You know, I don't know if any of y'all have taken the Strengths Quest. It's like an assessment that you take. It tells you your strengths. Well, I encourage you to take it because it really does kind of help other people get to know you and for you to get to know yourself. So for example, for me, my top strengths are learner, achiever, discipline, focus, and responsibility. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell. When you learn about Strengths Quest, what you'll learn is there are relationship strengths. I don't have any. All mine are in executing and strategic. Those are the things that I'm really good at. However, I use my strengths to build relationships. So I'm a very responsible person. When I was 24 and worked at Insight Media, every time somebody went on a vacation, I was the house sitter and the dog sitter because they trusted me. And so I built relationships through being a responsible person. And so I've always built relationships and built networks around myself from being responsible to the point where when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so again, from a very young age, that's just kind of what I have always done. You know, when I was at Lindsey Wilson, I was an orientation leader. I was a student ambassador. I led tours for the admissions office, again, because it's something I was passionate about. It's something I enjoyed. And, you know, and when thinking about careers, I know a lot of you are probably I know there are some folks here that are already professionals, but many of you are in your undergrad and you know, you may have a major and you may have a general idea of what you want to do, but that will change, that will evolve, that will be a constant thing that you're learning about yourself. And so I think it's okay if you sort of know what you want to do right now, but you're not sure, or you do know, but then you change your mind. Like all of those things are okay. I mean, when you think about it, I was a senior in college when Facebook came out, okay? No one knew that there would be jobs associated with that when I was a senior in college. No one knew that there would be a director of social media at any institution or any business. And so if you think about how things change and evolve, I couldn't have predicted that in 2005 and 6 whenever that was happening. So it's okay if things progress along the way and change and it's not exactly how you saw it and how it's going to be, because it will all just work itself out. And that's how it's happened.
I really like when you mentioned that because, I mean, you mentioned Steve Jobs, you know, early on. He talks about connecting each moment. And so it's like, you know, you create this path and you say, this is the direction I'm going, but it's about connecting, right? And so can you talk a little bit more, because you have, I mean, you've gone in this direction. This is the North Star, right? You know where you wanted to end up, but you didn't know exactly the path or what it would look like, right, when it was there.
I didn't know where I wanted to end up. I didn't know anything.
So how do you navigate through that ambiguity then?
You know, I don't know where I want to end up. I have no idea. You know, when I started at Spalding as an admissions counselor, I didn't plan to stay 7 years. I mean, when I started, they said, will you commit to 1 year? And I said, I can do that. I can commit to a year. I had no idea I was going to love higher ed, you know. I worked in higher ed for a year, and then I worked in sales, and I knew I didn't like that. But again, I committed to a year because I thought it was the right thing to do. I knew I didn't want to do that, so that was the only thing I knew for certain. Then I was in higher ed, I did that for 14 years, 15 years. Then I had healthcare for the brief stint, and I'm back in higher ed. So the only thing I know is that I'm passionate about higher education, mainly because of the transformative experience that it was for me. And I'm passionate about people being empowered to learn and to be empowered to create change. And so really the only thing I do know is that I'm passionate about higher education. What that means in the future, I have no idea. You know, I do enjoy serving as a part-time lecturer at U of L. I don't know if that means one day I'll be a professor. You know, I have no idea. And the ambiguity is what keeps life exciting. I'm a planner, but for that, it's not something I want to be planned. I just want things to happen. Like, I didn't plan on starting my own business in February when everything happened, but I did. And I still have freelance clients that I'm working with. I have 4 freelance clients that I'm working with that I didn't plan that to happen, but it did. Was it terrifying to do that? Yes. But, you know, nothing good comes without risk, in my opinion. And you have to be willing to embrace the fear and to move forward. And to be okay with change, which I'm not, but I've had to be.
You talked a little bit about negotiation, and I think that's a really important skill to learn, and it's like many of us don't know how to negotiate, because you said you made a list of the things, the absolute wants, right, that you had to have in a job. You didn't mention financially, right?
I can talk about that.
But could you talk about that? Because I think that's
I can.
I mean, for me, that is a skill that I wish I had known at your age, because how do you go in and then say, I need a job, I'm going to take the first job that comes, my way?
Well, I want to start with, for the ladies in the room specifically, I recently read a paper, like a research paper on this, and it said that 75% of women leave money on the table during a negotiation process. When I negotiated my job at Bellarmine, the guy said, the person before you, female, didn't negotiate and she left money on the table. And I kept saying, are you sure you want to accept? Are you sure you don't want to? And she didn't get it, and she didn't ask for more money. And so he said to me, I'm really glad that you did, because you would have left money on the table. So I start there because the article I read was about women, not saying guys. I'm not trying to single you out. I'm just saying specifically women. 75% typically leave money on the table. And the person that I recently accepted a job with said to me, I'm glad you didn't, because you would have left money on the table like the person before you. So I'll start with that. The next thing I'll say, you have to know your worth. You know, it also has to be realistic. I think I'm worth more than I'm making. However, money isn't everything. And I've learned that through my career, is that happiness, work-life balance, and all of those things sometimes are more important to me than money, because time is more precious to me than money. But the negotiation process, typically, like, for example, when I was at U of L, I negotiated there too. They had a range of it was like a $30,000 range. Well, that's a huge difference. Like, if you offer me at the low end of the range, no. If you offer me at the top end of the range, that's wonderful, but you're probably not. You're probably going to go somewhere in the middle. And that tends to be what happens depending on where you are in your career and how much experience you have. So I encourage you, when you apply for a job and there's a huge range like that, know that the likelihood of them going to the top is very small, because what they told me was, well, that's the max that you could earn if you stayed in this job for 20 years, is the top. So again, they're not going to offer you the top. But I encourage you to do your research. Look at what other positions in the industry of the type are paying. That's one thing that I did, is I did my research. I had never negotiated, like when I started at Spalding, I had never negotiated before, and I didn't. I just accepted. Every job since, I've negotiated. And what that looks like is, if the person says, what's your salary expectations? I say, well, what's the budget for this position? Because I don't want to start with an astronomical number. I also don't want to go really low and the budget was higher. So I asked for the budget, and they'll typically give you a range. And instead of saying, like, I demand blah, I'd say, I was really hoping for closer to blah. And so far, so good. Since I've started negotiating, I've gotten everything I've asked for. But I didn't negotiate at the beginning because I didn't know. So just be realistic. Don't come in with a crazy number. Know your worth and ask for more, is my advice.
Well, I really like what you said, because I think doing the research shows that you're interested in the job. Asking what the budget is means you're interested in the job. You're interested in working together. And I think that's important too, so it's not just throwing a big number there and then expecting them to play that.
And they say not to ask in an interview, like the first interview, like what the salary is, because it's, can be deemed disrespectful. And I get that. I try to apply to jobs that have the salary listed, and I wish more jobs did, because it's not fair for you to waste your time, for them to waste their time, for you to get to the end of a process and you're like, I need more than that. I can't live off that. I do want to temper expectations. My first job out of college, now obviously things have changed, but I'll be completely transparent. My first job out of college, I made $17,000 a year. $17,000 a year. Okay? Second job out of college, Insight Media, $24,000 a year. Third job out of college, $27,000 a year. Okay? So I say all that because when I was a senior, sitting where you're sitting, I thought I was going to come out making a lot more than that. So I learned real quickly what I needed versus what I wanted. Because I didn't need cable. Thought I did. Didn't need it. When you only have so much to go around. So again, I'm not saying that's going to be the case here. You all may all come out making six figures, and I hope that you do. I didn't. And so I'm just being transparent with you so that you can have realistic expectations, because mine were not realistic. I'm making more than that now, but I wasn't at the time. Like I said, I'll be real honest. What else? Anybody? Yeah.
How do you go about building a new connection with either like a company or CEO,
Yeah.
especially if you don't have a connection?
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, building a connection with, a CEO. I would start lower on the totem pole if it were me. I would start, somebody a little bit lower and try to have somebody else do the introduction. What I've learned is that presidents and CEOs of companies are extremely busy people. They're being pulled in 1,000 different directions. And so for me, it's always good to have an in. And so, trying to find somebody that's on maybe a leadership level, but not the head of like a place, is how I would do it. Because then that way, if you make the connection with someone else, and they're going to be more likely to listen to their employee. So if you reached out to me and you wanted to connect with the president of Bellarmine, I could say, hey, Dr. Donovan, so-and-so, I met at this thing. He's really interested in this. Can you please chat with him about blah? It just would probably give you a better chance of being connected than if you were just to randomly message them, if that makes sense. So that's why it's important to kind of build those connections, director level, C-level, but maybe not the top person. But that's a good question. Thank you. Yeah.
I would just add to that. I think a good suggestion is to think about if it's a job you're interested in. Look for a person that's doing that job. LinkedIn's a great place for that. And ask for advice. What is it like getting in and work in this industry or in this particular job? And that may be a better starting place than going to the top of the organization.
No, that's a great idea and great suggestion. One of the assignments that we have students in the online MBA at U of L do is they reach out to somebody that they don't know in their network, a CEO, and they ask to interview them to learn more about exactly what Dr. Reese just said. And so it is a really good way to make connections for them in their industry, and they have a chance to sit down and interview somebody to kind of learn more about what it's like being in their shoes.
Just to bring that point home, I'm going to have a career conference on February 13th and 14th, and there will be networking opportunities that you can sign up for. It would be an opportunity, and hopefully like alums that might be coming in to do these networking opportunities, but it's a chance for you to talk to people, ask them questions about what their job is like. How did they get their first job? What were the steps that they took? Any of this advice so that you're starting a little further ahead than maybe what they did as they sort of learned the hard way. The other thing is don't be afraid to talk to people who are in other professions, because you can explore other areas as well. I mean, one of the things that I've always been so impressed with Amanda is that if I don't know where I'm going, whether it's right or not, right? Whether it's a good fit or not, and because she knows herself, right, what you want, and I think that's something that's very important.
Well, and I want to say this too, because it happened recently, and it kind of struck me, and it's something that I feel pretty strongly about, and I'm going to be honest, it pissed me off. I'll just be frank. So, I had been here at Spalding for 14 and a half years, I think. I'd been here for a while and had a great experience here. And I was kind of, interested, like I said, in the position at U of L and serving as a part-time lecturer there and working in their College of Business. And then I got, kind of recruited by this healthcare company, and now I'm at Bellarmine. So that's a lot of changing. I mean, when you've been in a place for 14 and a half years, and then suddenly I had 3 jobs in the span of 2 years, it could be looked at in a negative way. And as someone who cares, like I said about reputation, I care what people think about me. That crossed my mind every time. Like, what are people going to think? What are people going to think? But they're not the ones going to work every day, so why do I care what they think? I had a girl recently stop me, and she's like, "Where are you now? I know you've moved around a whole lot. I can't keep up with where you're at now." And I was just like, you know what? And I didn't, of course, I was very nice. I said, "Actually, I'm now the director of communication at Bellarmine. It's going really well, blah, blah, blah." But when she said that, it just kind of went right through me, because it brought back the fears and the concern that I had all that time about what do people think, what do this, what do that. But at the end of the day, you will, and right now I am the one that has to go to these places every day. It's my life, and it'll be your life. So don't let the opinions of others keep you in a position that you're not happy in, or make you take something you don't want to take. Do what's best for you, because you're the one that has to go there every single day, and it's your life. And so, like me, you'll probably worry and think that somebody may judge you, and they will. But I don't care. I mean, when she said it, yes, it annoyed me. But you have to do what's best for you. So that's my biggest piece of advice too, is do what's best for you every day. Make the decisions that are best for you, not for other people.
How do you talk about those jobs in interviews? Because people will ask, right?
Yeah.
How do you talk about those?
Never say anything negative about a former employer, no matter how bad it was. Never do that. Don't even say anything negative about a former employer in the community, because you don't know who knows who. I've learned that, and I've seen that, and I've experienced that in the job searches that I've been a part of. I mentioned earlier, people know people. They ask you to screenshot this, that, the other. Whenever I'm in an interview and I'm asked why I left a company, I always make it about me. I never make it about them. Because Louisville, especially if it's in this town, it's a small city. Like, for example, Dr. Reese, doesn't your husband work at Bellarmine, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's a connection. If I were interviewing or anything with a position, actually I've met other people from the other colleges at Bellarmine. That's a connection. It's very easy to find somebody who knows somebody. So again, don't speak negatively about previous jobs. Now, they're going to ask you why you left. And she talked about stories. Tell a story. Don't lie. Don't to be too truthful. Like I said, if you had a bad experience somewhere, it's not the place. So just tell a story. Your story, why you chose to leave. Just not negative, because like I said, people know people. Yeah. I really appreciate your all's time and attention and your questions. And, she said, building your network. I'm happy to connect with any of you. I think I put my email address here. If I didn't, sorry. No, I just put Tay. So if you need to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Amanda Lucas. I'm happy to connect and happy to help however I can. If you have a question outside of this, I'm happy to answer it. Yeah.